Okay, it's weird. Like just like all of the options were just like vanished for a bit. So
Mm-mm-mm.
it's like someone doesn't want us podcasting, man. It's them, the band, them with Van Morrison.
Ah, classic sound.
Huh. Okay, bringing my thing up. I don't know. I guess we don't need to like shoot the shit. We can just get into it.
That sounds fine. I mean,
What's your time?
conversational.
What's your timing, by the way?
It's not that strict. Just
Okay, because I
up
think
the.
Maddie's showing it seems like he's going to be at the station in about 55 minutes, but I think we'll
Okay,
be
okay,
finished
no
before
worries.
that.
Yeah, we got time.
Okay, give it 5 seconds just so I can like see where the edit is.
Sure, take your time.
Welcome. It's Oral Hygiene. It's a podcast where we talk about caught films, experimental films, educational films, apparently Disney films now. That's now on the docket. So here we are. This is Matt here. There is Scott. I think it's been a year since you've actually been on this one.
Shikram Yanirut. Peace be to all in Scottish Gaelic. Yeah,
Oh, you're right. We did that. That's much less
that's
than a
correct.
year. Okay, forgot about that because that was the Garth Marenghi's Dark Cast, which ended up in the Aural Hygiene
Who could
feed.
forget?
So it just, it all breaks my head in the end. So yeah, we're having a hot one here. Ready? I've already taken 2 showers today. I'm gonna go to the onsen, and then I'll probably take a bath tonight. There's gonna be 4 washings of the water, which I've
Bit
heard
of a
some
stinker
people say.
outside.
I've heard some people say like you shouldn't like wash yourself like every day, and here I am doing it 4 times in a day. But I don't know. Maybe it's you shouldn't like go soap crazy 4 times a day. Is that it?
Yeah,
Water
I
seems
think.
fine.
Yeah, yeah. What would Lilith do? Lucifer Rising, definitely.
That's right.
I think, but yeah. I mean, the day before the summer solstice.
Oh yeah, that's a good time for
So
Lucifer Rising.
yeah,
Here,
yeah,
I mean, this will be released much later. Sorry, folks, you missed it, but we're here for it. Um,
yeah. It's quite the
uh,
event.
Kenneth Anger is Tripper here, Lucifer Rising. That's the film. Hey Scott, can you give like the TV guide synopsis? Like you're gonna sit down with the family, 8 p.m. taking Lucifer Rising. How do they
Eating the
tell you
bangers and
that one?
mash. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's one of those ones, maybe the more you watch it, the less one kind of knows what it actually means. It's very interesting. But you asked me, like, how would you describe it previously? And I just wrote this about 20 minutes ago. But I think in a nutshell, it's a creation story. As IMDb says, it's about the birth of a new era or the new aeon, archetypal, profound, as well as violent. So, not the usual image people when they think of creation. So, it's also like the magical process of alchemy, the philosopher's stone, that's the transformation of the material into something more kind of transcendent beyond the sort of dualistic or elemental. Um, but it's the spirit of kind of enlightenment.
A bit
Um,
much for the TV guide, I guess. But yeah, I guess there's not really a story to really latch on to here. It's like
yeah,
here's some Iris, here's some Horus, here's a badass biker jacket.
yeah, it was made over 4 years too, so there's a lot of different pastiches and montages and things like that. So, um, but I could give you word from the Magus's mouth, Kenneth Angelmeyer, aka Anger himself. Um, this is also pretty brief. Lucifer's message is that the key to joy is disobedience. Isis, nature, woke Osiris, death, answers Lilith, destroyer, who climbs to the place of sacrifice. The Magus activates the circle, and Lucifer, the bringer of light, breaks through. Very
Put that in your TV guide
time.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah, which it
um,
does live up to that claim.
I guess we'll work into the visuals, but let's start with the sound because this one has like just a bizarro, you know, matrix of matrices of soundtrack to think about.
Yeah.
So I think the one that both you and I watched was Bobby
Beausoleil.
Beausoleil. Okay, so I was testing myself if I could say it right because I wrote Bobby B in my notes. I didn't even want to spell it,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
Beulah. So I always had some bizarre ass pronunciation. So when you said it to me correctly, I was like, oh yeah, that seems right. Okay.
It might chime in with the solstice too, because soleil is sun.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Now he recorded this in prison for absolutely wild reasons, of course, being not quite a member, but a affiliated an actor of the Manson family.
Mhm.
What did he do? He downed a man before the Manson family really got cracking, was it?
That's right. The victim's name was Gary Hinman, who was a PhD student, um, and it was over some. Please don't quote me on this, but it was over some bad mescaline, I believe, um, and I think Charlie wanted a
Is
hit.
that like I'm angry because I got the bad mescaline, or I'm on the bad mescaline?
Perhaps it sounds like probably both, but I think it was the initial one.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I mean, this must be the best soundtrack recorded in prison. Not best album. Johnny Cash gets that, but
yeah. One thing I also checked a lot of what a lot of words from the horse's mouth. Kenneth Anger himself said. He said, which is kind of funny. Bobby, who acted and wrote the soundtrack, was a good lad who turned bad. He was a Scorpio.
oh, okay. I'm not a Scorpio. I'm a Pisces fish.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, little astronomy with your not astronomy, excuse me. Sorry, folks, astrology with your jam. But hey, if you go back far enough, they all
And the
pertain
bad
to one another.
mescaline. Yeah.
Yeah, that and bad mescaline. Do
That's a good
astrology on
reason
bad
for it.
mescaline. Um,
Some
there
good song lyrics out of that, I think. Yeah.
there is also a Jimmy Page soundtrack out there. And honestly, since this one doesn't, I mean the Beausoleil probably is the one that's most identified with this. It has a nice credit in the sequence, but this is the one where you're basically allowed like to record your own soundtrack. And then there's an alternate one that Jimmy Page recorded, being a big Crowley fan, which we haven't said Crowley yet, but obviously that is a major part of this movie. Kenneth Anger basically being a disciple of the wickedest man.
Mm. It's interesting too with the Jimmy Page soundtrack. There is a bit of reading into the background between with Kenneth. He had a lot of fallings out with a lot of people he collaborated or worked with, or who worked for him. It's interesting. Maybe it's just artistic ego or things like that clashes over sort of doctrine.
It could be Church of Satan intense. I don't know. One interesting thing, this is just like basically he looked like a normal dude until about 15 years ago, and then suddenly turned into the crypt keeper, which is and he's still alive. That's wild because what how old is he now? He's got to be like 90
Almost
plus.
90?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's amazing.
Older than the Queen's corgis.
Yeah. He's the Queen's keeping him alive on baby's blood. Is that libel?
Yeah.
Nothing like a public forum to just spew out things like that, I guess. But
yeah, and beating down on Bill Gates. But anyway, this is how we do it.
Yeah. Anyway, like this one's probably worth watching twice just so you can do both soundtracks, because both of them are pretty groovy. I think I actually do dig Bobby's more in the end. It's just kind of got a nice like weird ambient jam feel that I like. So and the fact that you're like, hey, this is recorded in prison just does add a weird like, I don't know. It's I mean, like a good guy who got into bad shit, right? But he's made a decent soundtrack there, so
I guess when you're in something called Lucifer Rising, anything's going to go. But
yeah, the guy
it is multifaceted, though, isn't it? Though.
Yeah, really. I guess we should get into the visuals now that we've wrapped about the music a little bit. There is more here in that. Of course.
Yeah, one interesting thing though, when I was researching this, was Kenneth Anger definitely has some powers of persuasion or something, or somebody's really helping him. I'm impressed because the way he could film surreptitiously in Egypt, because the authorities wouldn't have allowed such a film to go down. Images in front of the Sphinx and pyramids. But they
might have been a little easier at that point in time, though, because again, what was it, like Transformers before the pyramids actually got to be a movie setting? I think Transformers 2, but
But also with the soundtrack, with the guards at Tracy State Prison, like the way that he could get like Bobby to, with some of the other inmates, to compose like such a soundscape. It's quite fascinating.
Well, you can make it sound like, a socially progressive thing to do. Like, hey, we're going to rehabilitate them by having them do some art while they're stuck where they are, for things they did, admittedly, of course. But yeah, I'm just thinking in the 70s, because you'd have like Sun Ra and the Grateful Dead and the Pink Floyd, the Pink Floyd all playing at the pyramids, which I don't think people get away with pyramid concerts anymore. Paul Horn, I think he has a pyramid album. His best one's in the Taj Mahal. He would just take his flute into like sound spaces and wail for a while and let the echo play with him. And it seemed to actually work out better in the Taj Mahal, but he did one in the pyramids as well.
Well, you know where to take your jazz master next time.
Yeah, really. We start off with just a bunch of volcanoes, like 3 minutes of volcanoes in a 27-minute film. So that's notable, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting
Fires
too.
of hell.
A lot of the dualism, because you see like the hottest of hot, and lava flowing everywhere, magma bursting out of volcanoes, and
then
you have the sea. Yeah, I was thinking of the ocean, man. But you got the rain over the ocean. Then you've got Lucifer rising, the title appearing in flame.
Oh, that's one of the best title sequences ever. Holy crap! Yeah. Lucifer rising out of the waters. It's fantastic.
Yeah, not Lucifer falling, interestingly enough.
Well, that sounds depressing, right? You don't want your music, your movie to fall. You want it to rise, yeah?
Good propaganda, anyway, the inversion of things,
Another pastoral hygiene. You know what went through my mind once we see Isis? Probably because you looked at my notes, but safety woman.
Oh, yes.
Just she was doing the similar motions from just a few. I'm not saying Safety Woman was like taking anything from Lucifer Rising. It's funny how the same images end up in like such disparate places and are kind of the same thing. Safety Woman did not have the titty hanging out, but yeah, that's just the Comet hello,
The good old days. It's a little more fun than elbow bumping. But
okay, I don't think I've really talked to people and be like, what's happening here? We have Isis signaling Osiris. Is that how I should read this?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, because she picks up the Ankh, the symbol of life, from a cartouche or something, and then lifts it up a number of times. And then I believe it's Osiris who responds in turn.
So. Does that make Horus the dude with the bloody bathtub and the badass jacket?
Yeah, I mean, he's interesting. Technically, he's because nobody's credited in the movie, so it's really hard to know who does what, even though there's not a huge pantheon of characters. But I think he's termed the Magus, and there's also an acolyte or something.
Okay.
Or the adept, but yeah.
The Lucifer Rising Universe.
Magus
LRU.
He's Magus number 1.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing, though. There's no dialogue here, right? So you kind of have to work it out on your own. So I'm like, I don't know if my Horus thoughts are completely wrong. Did Horus have to go kill a bunch of people?
It's interesting. I think Horus actually was forgiveness, because he could have gotten revenge on Seth, who killed his father, but he chose not to.
So maybe that makes our bathtub boy Seth, because he's covered in blood.
Yeah. Good point, because he could be the one that killed and also took out Horus's eye, I believe, or eyes. The 1 or 2. So
I think it's 1, because we got the eye of Horus all the time. Yeah. I mean, that could have a different connotation. I'm not sure, but one of your big takes was the Philosopher's Stone, and it looks like I put about a 25% through my notes. I was asking if it's a Philosopher's Stone. I think we get a flash of a kind of ruby red sort of thing a few times. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, that's right. I think Magus number one, aka Bathtub Boy, after he performs the deed, he sacrifices I believe, a red-headed lady in the forest with a javelin, and then there's images of a dagger. He's covered in blood, and then he goes into the bath, and then there's this definitely it's a ruby-like four-sided jewel, I think, which is supposed to be the Philosopher's Stone, which Crowley does allude to a lot in his writings.
Just a weird thing that I just did a podcast about 1994 Stargate, like as in the movie, where they kind of have the thing where one of the main characters dies and is put into sort of a pyramidal structure and resurrected. I mean, it's dopey sci-fi Roland Emmerich movie, but it's just like that. There's like the pop culture version, whereas Lucifer Rising is this more like kind of esoteric, experimental version. So
yeah.
Obviously, in my ramble at the beginning of this podcast, this goes into the cult experimental basket for sure.
It's the true cult film.
Maybe educational. Did it teach you anything?
It probably teaches me not to run into them in a dark alley at midnight.
Especially with Van Morrison. Sorry, I made that joke a second time.
Yeah, there are actually some demigods I really wouldn't, or demiurges I wouldn't want to meet. The wrong place at the wrong time.
There's one demiurge, right?
Well,
many demigods.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're just going Gnostic.
I mean, basically, I think the way, perhaps you yourself too, I wanted to watch this without like any, preconditioned thoughts or, preconceived notions. So when I was watching this, I didn't want to think of like Crowley as bad or Lucifer bad or good, which some rock stars might have that idea. But I think I was definitely groovy to a lot of the notions. I think just the sacrifice part was a bit alienating for me. I thought, did we actually need to sacrifice someone to have this ritual? Maybe it's naive on my part, but I think the sacrifice is very Old Testament-ish. So.
Well, we did the Brackage's film Dogman Star, also having a lot of blood, also in creation, but in that case,
through the
very
childbirth,
different. Right?
And that's more sort of incidental of something, but it's rather than sort of a deliberate shedding of blood.
Like I do feel
somebody
like
else's blood. Yeah,
I do feel like philosophically, I'd probably be more on Team Brackage than Team Anger. I mean, come on, Team Anger. That sounds badass, but it's not the team you necessarily want to be on,
Yeah. No, I I definitely had that vibe because Lilith, because after the sacrifice, Lilith appears too. So who's Marianne Faithful, right?
Right. And yeah, that's because I was like, oh, I thought we were doing Veronica. Now we got some Betty,
Yeah, it's interesting. As I did a little bit of reading into this,
because Mick Jagger, who dated her for a while, did one of Anger's earlier soundtracks for was it Scorpio Rising? No, it wasn't that. It was something else. It's the one that's name is escaping me, but was not a good soundtrack. Not like this one. He really was just making electronic noise, but he did it. And he was one of the biggest stars in the world when he did it. So
sympathy for the Lucifer. Yeah. It's interesting because as I did a little bit of delving, just prepping for this podcast, Lilith's very interesting. Apparently, like the lunar opposite of the solar Isis, and she rises from that sarcophagus in blue and gray, and Lucifer Rising, right from times like Babylonian, but also with Jewish or Greek folklore, she appears. In Jewish folklore, she's said to be like the first wife of Adam who wouldn't lie down with him in the parlance of those times, and voluntarily left the Garden of Eden. And in Mesopotamia, she's associated with dust storms, disease.
When she is a
sexual temptation.
She's also very tied in with Gnosticism. So It's
Yeah.
not just like, in fact, I was like, what is that, Egyptian? Because I always thought of Lilith as kind of a, part of that scene.
Mesopotamian and
Yeah, I mean,
after
obviously it's all a little time,
Greek.
tied in together. Sorry,
Yes.
I was just looking up the name of the one Jagger did the soundtrack for, which, because I knew it had a fantastic title, which it does, which is a Invocation of My Demon Brother.
You can kind of figure out that what's it.
Yeah, I just need to make sure to scream that one out because it's a fantastic name.
Yeah, one of the Queen's favorites, or her corgis, but whatever.
What is it that tickles everyone's fancy on Egyptian like iconography? Because I feel like no one looks at this stuff and is like, I mean, the sacrifice stuff, like you said, can be alienating, but as far as like ankhs and those giant helmets and pyramids, all that stuff just kind of looks right to everybody, like the sculptures that seem laser cut. They just kind of look right to everybody. I don't think anyone is like, man, that Egyptian stuff's ugly.
Yeah, I mean, it's very poignant. Like anybody from around the world could look at it and pinpoint exactly what that is and what country it's in, basically. It's pretty cool. It's very distinct.
I mean, I like the drawing the line back to Atlantis, and then again the ancient Egyptians, the Kemet people. If they did sort of say they were a legacy culture, we kind of like got this from someone else. So, I mean, the Incans said that, because now they're like, oh, the Incans, how the Incans build all this? Well, the Incans told you they didn't build it. Why are you trying to figure it out? Well, they were trying to tell you it, and then you murdered them all. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, wisdom's a pretty strong and faithful river running down through the course of humanity, just apart from the nonsense like war and colonialism. But, that's nothing new, unfortunately.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I've seen this movie a lot. This was probably, somewhere around 10 times I watched it last night. I mean, I watched it once last night, but that was probably about the 10th time. But you've been putting a magnifying glass on it, so why don't you just take the floor and spit out an interesting point or two?
Yeah.
if you don't mind being put on the spot that
Oh,
much.
no, it's all right. No, it's very interesting. I was actually very really impressed with just how lush it is, like visually, and also as like the sound texture. But I thought it really takes away the viewer. There's no audible dialogue, but you don't really need it, because what you're actually seeing, like some of those, the visual footage is just fascinating. That it's very ceremonial all the way through.
No, I'd say it's mostly speaking to you subconsciously, which, again, with where anger is coming from, we're not sure that's a good thing. But
yeah, is it some sort of weird Tavistock
like
program?
obviously we shouldn't take any points away from him as a filmmaker. That's all on point. That's why we're sitting here talking about this movie 50 years later. But but yeah, it's like, where is he coming from? Again, with the brackage anger divide. And I'm not saying their styles are the same. I'm just like, I feel like I have a better vibe for where brackage was coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in terms of like archetypes and symbols, it is interesting because it really forces one to sort of, if they want to go deeper with it, do their own research, unless they've been initiated into the OTO, or Thelema, which was Crowley's sort of religion that he created, or faith.
That was his jam.
Yeah, because religion sounds a bit, but with Lilith, it's interesting too, because Crowley's daughter, his first child was called, I wrote this down, More Ahathor Hecate Sappho Jezebel Lilith Crowley.
I was about to say there had to be a Jezebel in there, and I also remembered there being a Jezebel in there.
Yeah. But she was Lilith was a consort of Lucifer, so which she maybe did lie down with him, so which creates that androgyne Baphomet character, sort of the go-to.
Right. Um, Getting into the end, of course, we were trying to like work out the first half of the movie there, which was a little tricky, and then the end, like like cranks that up to 11 Spinal Tap style, right? So I'll you can riff that, and I'll read my notes. That first we get into the magical chamber, magical with a K, of course. It gets a little horny at this point. Don't look up anger on Pornhub. That'll get you some unfortunate results.
Quite. It's interesting because there's definitely you can really see the Crowleyan touch here. Like on the floor, there's Crowley's sort of pantheon of characters.
Yeah, I wrote sort of the a magic circle, squaring the circle, squaring the pyramid, rectangularly actually because of the aspect ratio. But definitely those magical symbology on the floor,
Yeah. In the middle of, I don't know if it's in the middle, but on the floor too, there's a sort of kingly like character with sort of rosy cheeks, hair trailing down, and he's
Satan
like
claws.
Ermine, yeah, that's right, like an ermine sort of coat. And he's the only character who I actually see saying something. We can't hear what he's saying, but he's sort of like mumbling something. And then Kenneth Anger, dressed as, I think, Magus #2, he sort of is it perambulates, but he basically twirls around
the magic circle,
faster and faster, which creates its own sort of vortex or its own sort of energy dynamic, which sort of goes galactic. Which kind of maybe instigates that that magical process.
No, I thought the magical process created the jacket. That was my take.
And a worthy one too.
Maybe it is, because if even on like wish.com, they want you to pay $250 for that. So
yeah, it's pretty lush. Also, that it's pretty spunky looking, even back in the dark days of '72. I mean, wow. It's shiny as a Pontiac Firebird or something. It's quite the fashion piece. Yeah, with Lucifer and multicolored. Yeah.
But yeah, we go through this whole like sequence of basically like John Dee style magic, and then we go back to Egypt at the end. So it's kind of like, I guess it's all related in the end, but I do feel like the what's the big word I miss? Enochian magic and Egyptian magic seem a little. I mean, Crowley was into both as well, right? But they're not. I feel like they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I was sort of like thinking of like Hermeticism, just through Hermes Trismegistus. So which would be like, which focuses on like Egyptians, like Egypt's Thoth, and also Greek, the Greek god Hermes. So, which was kind of a occultic thing in the 19th century, 20th century, which Crowley would have been probably made up half of it himself, but which is connected a lot with alchemy and magic, and sort of astrotheology. But I'd have to check out more about Enochian magic. Do you feel that's similar to Hermeticism, or?
Yeah. Like I said, the whole magical chamber sequence really made me, because John Dee, what was the other guy? Richard Kelly was his channel
consort,
whatever it was, and they just came up with mad things and the language of angels and all of that. And then the angels said they needed a wife swap, and I think that's where things went downhill.
Yeah. But you mentioned channeling, right? So that's where Crowley's wife comes in. Rose Kelly.
Right. Well, his Scarlet, a different Kelly, but his Scarlet woman of the moment, at least.
She was channeling Aiwass, which was like a being, like a super intelligent being, which gave him his work, because his wife then passed the knowledge to Crowley, like her husband, before he had her committed to an insane asylum for alcoholism. But the Book of the Law, that became the Book of the Law.
Exactly. Yeah. So
interesting.
I mean, you'll read modern channeled stuff, and a lot of it does come across as relatively hooey-ish, or weirdly aggressive. And I've said not the Seth that murders Osiris, but the the 70s one. I tend to, that stuff sounds solid to me. Again, I think a big point is it's just like thought experiments. It's not really telling you to do anything. It's not telling you to go murder anyone or swap wives or anything like that. I just want you to think about this from a different direction. I like that sort of thing. Even the Book of Law, I mean, you do what thou wilt would be fine if you just added "and don't be an asshole" to that,
Yeah.
Do what thou wilt and don't be an asshole. This shall be the whole of the law.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, one thing I like about Kenneth Anger's style is he doesn't pander to the audience, but he also like doesn't patronize the audience.
Not
It's
at
like
all.
up to, no, it's awesome. It's really awesome because it's like up to the viewer what they make of it. I mean, of course, Kenneth Anger has his own like direction, but it's entirely what you make out of it and what you do with that knowledge. It's really interesting. So I really like that. It's quite an adventure.
Now, once we get back to Egypt, in the end, we suddenly get all this wildly sci-fi stuff coming in. There's the dolmens and lightning that started to make me think of Highlanders. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying he's ripping off Highlanders. It's like 15 years earlier, right? But
Yeah.
it did have that kind of sci-fi feel, and then the weird like pink UFOs. I started thinking about Sun Ra more in that case. I mean, it looks like space is the place, which is contemporaneous of this about the same time. So it might just be like what special effects were at that, in the early 70s.
Yeah, it's like sort of a proto UFO cult kind of. It's interesting. But I mean, it's a really interesting way to finish. It's pretty mind blowing. You sort of got like the ancient future kind of concept, and even Jimmy Page's cameo. Like, it's impossible to look at this film without considering Crowley. Like, he's actually on the wall, surrounded by quite an elaborate frame, circular frame. And his pictures, his image is tinted greenish. But Jimmy Page himself is like sort of looking at a like cuneiform, not cuneiform, but hieroglyphic tablet, and he's like kind of looking at Crowley adoringly. I mean, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I am. We didn't watch it to get into this, but there are all of the sequences from the song Remains the Same, the Led Zeppelin concert film, which also includes like these weird vignettes, and I'm wondering if how much Kenneth Anger, I'm not saying he was even in on that movie. I don't think he was, but just obviously Jimmy Page would have been informed by that. That might have been the impetus to put that sort of thing in that movie. I mean, Jimmy Page bought what's the name of the place?
Boluskin.
Yeah.
Boluskin House.
Sorry, I just knew I'd screw up the pronunciation, so I asked you.
Yeah. It's a really interesting take on things, because it's impossible to not mention, just after, I think it's the image with Jimmy Page, who looks a lot like Terence McKenna, actually, or Terence McKenna looked a lot like him. But anyway, there's a certain image of, I believe it's Pan laying down with, in the parlance of the times, or standing up, laying down with a goat in a very interesting position. I'm not going to mention that on there, but but anyway,
don't type anger into Pornhub.
But yeah, I mean, that was interesting because actually Crowley himself identified as a Pan-like figure, so as maybe like a cosmic prankster, or somebody who can maybe usher in that sort of age of Aeon or something.
Yeah, well, not too long ago in this podcast, we were looking at Fantasia, where I thought I was looking at Cupids at first, because Disney later reused that animation for Cupids in a different movie. But watching, I was like, wait a minute, no, these are Pans, that he kind of put into Fantasia. So
yeah, and actually, I wrote down something that Crowley had written himself about Pan. He said, thrill with lissome lust of the night, O man, my man, come careering out on the night of Pan.
Mm.
Okay, so as one does.
Yeah. Although he never quite made it as a poet, and he didn't know it. So yeah, because he kept writing it.
Well, he started his own religion. I guess that counts for something.
Yeah, you start your own religion. You can write bunk poetry as much as you want. Is there anything? I guess you're staring at notes there. I'm staring at my notes on the computer. But is there anything else you really wanted to like pump out on this movie?
Yeah, actually, there was something. Yeah, I've just got because I wanted to bring to the table like actually primary sources, like things that Crowley had said, or also Anger had said too. One thing. Let's see. I believe this was okay. Horus is the cosmological force that brings order to primordial chaos. He can bring harmony to duality. So I believe that was Anger that had said that. Don't quote me on that, but anyway, I think that theme certainly pervades a lot of.
Well, yeah, that's Egyptian. There's the tie between Egyptian and Enochian. What was the other one we were talking about? Egyptian, Enochian.
Hermeticism.
Yeah, Gnosticism, all that is, the monad. The monad goes in a two, that's duality. The third rectifies the two, and that's Horus. Like the numbers are just Isis, Osiris, Horus, right? Or I don't know, maybe Osiris is first. I don't know which order you put them in, but
yeah. Because it is a good point, because actually maybe Crowley and Kenneth Anger would both agree that Horus attained wisdom, that evil is not a force to be overcome, but just to be worked with, mastered and balanced. So I think people that do watch this they might want to keep in mind that point. It's maybe I think the image of that sacrifice was pretty uncomfortable, but hopefully it's like a figurative thing. That I'd like to know more about, like, what was there like a necessity for such a thing? It was just probably on an elemental level rather than a literal level. I think that's the way I'd read into it.
Even from a filmmaking level, I mean, you got the Wild Angels a few years earlier, basically just an exploitation film for the drive-in, but with this insane Nazi funeral riot sequence. So I mean, you couldn't put that in your film now. So I think there is a certain amount of like boundary pushing to some of that stuff as well as all of the magical symbolism. It's like, how do you get Jimmy Page and Faithful? It's like, hey, we're bucking the system. We're being rebels, and we're sacrificing goats. Hey guys, you want to go sacrifice a goat today? It'll be awesome.
Yeah, if the barbecue's canceled, that's one thing one can do. Yeah, or also just like the little almost Ed Wood like sort of film sequences, like little pieces cut in of, you mentioned goats, but there's also one, just a random 2-second image of a cobra being trod upon by an elephant.
In my note I wrote, just a touch of snake to make you think.
Yeah.
Touching the snake in a violent way, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, definitely very profound and powerful forces at work. So I mean, on an elemental level, and I think a lot of the gods, goddesses, and deities involved in this are not literal. They're just like massive natural forces at work that we don't always see with our eyes, but that doesn't actually make them less real. But
yeah, that's where I say this movie speaks to subconscious, but I think it is worth knowing exactly what the intentions were because of that, because once you're familiar, even if it's from like kind of like, I'm not down with the Crowley and Kenneth Anger philosophy, you already know what it is, so you can appreciate it for what it is as opposed to you know, you can work that out. You know, it's like how really old movies sometimes have to put the disclaimer, like people are smoking in this movie, right?
Yeah. It's great with Kenneth Anger's work. I mean, he doesn't, at all dumb down his message. It's just great, and I think it's as lucid now as it was then. I mean, it's
Oh, for sure. Well, you can still sell the jackets for $250, and this movie never made any money that I know of. So,
well, actually, it was, which is an interesting point. It was funded by one of the Getty family. Might have been John Paul Getty. So they were the big oil family, right? So, but that was
Getty Images, yeah, that sort of thing. So,
but yeah, they
I mean, this is the sort
did
of
a lot of
art that needs
philanthropic work too. Yeah,
a patron, you know.
Yeah.
Put
it. Yeah. It's hard going to Disney Studios, and well, maybe we could. But
I've been to Disney Studios, at least the Florida version when it was there.
Gotcha.
I guess I'll tie a bow on this one today and just say this is Aural Hygiene Pod at Twitter and Facebook. We do lots of other podcasts with our pals under the Patreon umbrella of Podcastius. You'll hear some sci-fi films, you'll hear some Pokemon, some Twilight Zone, and then Scott and I do some music, and you'll find most of that at rovingsagemedia.bandcamp.com. You can plug something if you want, but I think I just did it.
Any comments or questions for me? Just contact myself through Matt.
Yeah, or try and like contact Scott through like a astral projection. That's the best way.
Works too. Yeah, the channels are open.
I was seeing how long ago.